In the heart of darkness, secrets lurk in every shadow. Welcome to the new content for Bendy Inc. Lord of Hell, where nothing is as it seems. Join us as we uncover the secrets of the Ink Lords and the evil plot that controls hell. Earlier, guys, do you feel that? Ah shit, is that a Hellshake Operation Ink machine? Bendy's squelching steps echoed through the dark, damp hallways as the wooden floorboards beneath creak and snap under the pressure of the Overlords' heavy steps. The TVs dimly lit the many rooms and switched channels randomly from old spools of Bendy cartoons to security feeds from outside the factory. All the while, the sounds of insidious ink dropped to the cold floor and static voices wavered through the decrepit palace. The ink demon marveled at his handiwork as he made his way to his throne. He had some unfinished business to attend to. The button was still there besides the almighty throne of ink and junk, waiting patiently to be pressed and bring the factory into unholy life. Bendy grinned with malice and ill intent as he sauntered up to the device. He sat upon his chair overlooking his home one last time before it was up and running. He also stared at the front door through his security camera for a solid minute to make sure he wasn't rudely interrupted. Now, with all distractions out of the way, Bendy began Operation NK Machine. He wholeheartedly yelled to himself as he slammed the button down into its post with enough force to actually crack it. This didn't stop it though. Grimy gears soon started turning as evil ink started to run off the cold cogs in larger quantities. The painful creaking of the cogs continuously pierced through the palace, as the factory itself began to groan and shiver in anticipation for its awakening. Rows upon rows of lamented lights burst through the hallways with impatience as they were finally free to work and glow in glum fashion as the only source of light in this black abyss. Ink began leaking from all angles and corners in rapid floods as the once bone-dry floors of the factory were soaked in the revolting liquid as dark as night. The inside of the factory was shifting and twisting in its slumber as rooms expanded. Halls stretched and loud yawns of pain were heard by all in this pitch-black hell. And by all I mean just Bendy, speaking of which. Bendy was shaking and laughing in evil glee as his own throne room kept on growing and morphing. Candles burned brightly as satanic symbols were etched onto the walls, floors and ceiling, glowing in an ominous red light that bathed the ink demon in pernicious fashion. Outside the factory, however, was where the real metamorphosis was occurring. Sinners of all shapes and sizes felt a strange tremor beneath their feet, as it shook the whole of Pentagram City with an ever-growing amount of force. Those who were closer to the origin of the tremors began to pedantically panic as they half realized this was the ink demons doing inside his fortress of death and despair. As a large crowd of unwary sinners gathered around the ink-stained foundations, the tremors suddenly ceased. A few demons let out sighs of relief. Was it over? All of a sudden, the ground surrounding the factory split and titanic fountains of ink shot up into the sky, swallowing and flooding the floor with a tsunami of the soul-stealing liquid. Nearby buildings were either washed away or collapsed from the force of the black waves. Not long after, dark structures exploded upwards, aiming to reach the heavens and taint it with dread and darkness. Along with the buildings, inky hands clawed through the dirt of hell, revealing themselves to be nightmarish zombies enslaved by the power of their master. They pulled out an array of tools from the ground with them and marched, slithered and crawled towards their master's dark lair, all while being burdened by cumbersome chains that bonded them to their new home from hell forever. The factory kept on expanding outwards, with more buildings and structures being revealed to the denizens of hell, who were already shocked to the bone on what was happening. The demons then felt something on their bodies. They looked upon themselves to see rain in hell. Upon closer inspection, the rain was of an oily color that reflected the burning hues of hell's landscape. The rain was also hot, very hot. It was too much for some to bear as they frantically tried to dry themselves off and run for any sort of shelter. However, not all of them made it. Those who were still in the black rain were either melted to pure bone in slow agonizing pain, or were corrupted by the rain's mind-numbing magic and soon stopped fighting the temptation to work for the ink demon. Those unlucky few slowly made their way to the factory as they knew they had a lot of work ahead of them, all in the name of their cartoon ruler. After more monotonous minutes of pain screeches and disaster-causing development, silence fell upon the factory once again. In one last piece, the factory's new and humongous chimney bellowed a mighty horn that reverberated far and wide, one that can be heard from all 7 rings in fact. Once the chimney finally stopped, it hideously coughed up a combination of black tar and smoke from its pipes. The intense searing, boiling heat of the smoke could even be felt from far away in the king's palace, who was yet another concerned onlooker to the horrific scene. The deathly clouds enveloped the crimson sky in an almost endless void of poisonous black, pleasing a certain radio demon who gazed upon the view of the factory. "Alaster, finally a new change of scenery," he exclaimed as he continued on his merry way. Finally it was finished. The ink-drooling palace had finally been born out of hell's dark womb, and would mark the birth of a new order, one that would strike terror into those who resist and bring everlasting power to the one sitting upon his throne. Bendy was drooling ink in satisfaction, for he had gained a strong foothold in the hierarchy of hell. All he needed now were strong-willed workers to complete his goals. Later, ding-dong, the bell at the door rung, announcing the arrival of the factory's first permanent residents. Bendy skipped towards the front door and opened them to be greeted with two old, weirdly dressed men. "Loopty-goopty, greetings, Bendy, I am Loopty-goopty." He spoke in a cartoonish way with cartoonish mannerisms to match. "Lyle Lipton, and I'm Lyle Lipton. We found out there was an opening for a pair of genius inventors here in this factory. We thought we could offer our services. In return for payment, of course," he said in a similar way to Loopty. "Bendy, why of course? When you say genius inventors, how genius are we talking? Loopty-goopty will be able to make Disneyland look like a mini golf course compared to this place. Bendy, now you're speaking my language. Please come in. Let's get you acquainted with your new workshop. Spider and a web, boom boom boom." The sounds of blazing infernos and collapsing structures echoed across the blood-stained city, as demons woke up to the beautifully horrific sound of destruction and crackling fires. Two sinners sprinted across the rooftops whilst throwing miniature bombs around the city without a care in hell, whilst marveling at their beautiful art piece. An art piece of singed bones and flesh. The two mischievous death-bringers finally halted at the roof of a dirty building. They both breathed heavily and one of them howled in sheer joy. "W.O. I love the smell of fucked up shit in the morning. You gotta admit, Angie, I was right. Angel Dust, you know what you were. That was the biggest rush I've ever fucking had. You can thank me later. Now I just gotta deal with my bitch of a landlord. Angel Dust, go get him, Cherry," before giving a thumbs up 4 times. After a few minutes of arguing and threats of collateral damage, Cherry and Angel were able to get the keys and walk up to their secret room, the place Angel has been seeking refuge. As they were trotting up the steps, Angel looked down in deep thought. "Cherry, you okay?" Angel Dust, "Oh yeah, fine. Just thinking about stuff." "Cherry, and by stuff you mean him?" Cherry raised her singular eye in suspicion as Angel just nodded. "Cherry, look, I promised I'd help you and I am. There's no need for guilt trippin', I got you covered," she exclaimed, trying to cheer her friend up. "Angel Dust, I know. But at least I had a job when I was with him. And it was all I was really good at, you know. I just want to help you. I know you're struggling to just support yourself." Angel had a small look of concern for the only friend he has ever had down here. A friend who doesn't judge his sexuality or see him as a toy to be used and then stamped on. "Cherry, I told you I got you covered. I've been saving up some money for the past few years so you can stay here for as long as you need. Now, how about we binge some of hell's hottest shows and drink till we're asleep?" "Angel Dust, you read my mind, sugar tits." They both grinned at each other as they unlocked the door to their current home. A home that was tiny, cramped, and stunk of all the drugs you can imagine. But their home nonetheless. Except something was wrong. All the lights were destroyed and much of the furniture had been torn to shreds in a scene that looked like it was from a grim crime scene. The room was almost left in complete darkness if it wasn't for the singular TV bathing the corners of the flat in a ghoulish light. Static was all that could be heard as the incessant noise slowly drilled into the brains of the two alarmed friends. What got them the most, however, was the silent black and white cartoon that was being played on the screen behind all the static noise, and the person sitting on the ruined sofa watching it. "Bendy, I was wondering when you would be back." At this point, both Cherry and Angel had pulled out their weapons consisting of Tommy guns and grenades while the figure still sat there motionless. "Cherry, who the flying fuck are you?" she said in a clearly angered tone as she looked upon the carnage that was inflicted upon her room. "Bendy, I think the real question is, who are you? To be so bold as to hide a famous porn star in your own flat while bombing the denizens of hell like there's no tomorrow." He answered in a calm tone. underlaced with just a hint of malice. Bendy, aren't you aware of the true damage you're causing? To livelihoods, to businesses, to him," he said while not even looking back at the two sinners threatening him. As soon as a him was mentioned, Angel knew who he meant. Angel Dust. "Ah, so you're just some poor schmuck that Val hired to get my ass back in his hands, that right?" Bendy: "Not exactly. Angel Dust, well, whoever the fuck you are, you can fuck off and tell him that I'm not going back. Not now or ever, I'm done." The intruder only chuckled at this threat, still refusing to look behind him. "Bendy, how naive must you be to think that you can just run away, Angel Dust? He is a part of your past, and the past defines who you are in the present by the choices you made. You chose to sell your soul to him. You chose to become a gay porn actor. And you chose to become friends with a bomb freak. By running away from the past, you're only running away from who you truly are. Angel Dust, the last choice was different. It was a smart one. Now get the fuck out before we blow your head to bits." Bendy: "No, Angel. The smart choice was to never leave that hotel," he answered in a distorted and demonic voice. Bendy: "How ironic that the spider, trying to escape its own web that is its life, has only become further entrapped by its tightly wound silk that is its poor decisions. Cherri, I've had enough." Before she could continue with her sentence, Cherri just noticed something in the corner of her eye while the two other demons in the room conversed. TV, which was still playing the seemingly innocent show, was occasionally glitching. The background of the show was switching between a heavenly gray field of tall grass to a tiny, cramped dark room, not too dissimilar to her own room. She furrowed her only brow in confusion as a part of her thought she was just seeing things, but the other part was instinctively saying something was wrong. She leaned in just a little so she wouldn't be noticed by the intruder in order to get a better look. The screen kept flashing different images while the cartoon figure in the center of the screen remained the same as he was talking to what seemed like two friends. One of them looked vaguely like a spider and the other had just one eye. Wait a minute. The argument between Angel and the demon was now coming back into focus as Cherri was just zoning out before when she noticed the anomaly. She still kept her attention on the screen as the argument was carrying on. An argument which was close to becoming an all-out brawl. She looked at the focus character on the screen with interest. It looked a little like Mickey Mouse. Probably a ripoff. The character in question was talking to the two other characters and Cherri couldn't help but notice the similarities. The main character's lips were moving up and down, forming random words she obviously couldn't hear. Or could she? Cherri listened in on the conversation that kept going back and forth between her friend and the demon while still firmly looking at the TV. The words being spoken were matching the lip movements of the characters. "Angel Dust, Cherri, help me kick this guy's ass," he said. At the exact same time, the spider on screen mouthed what Angel said. Angel lifted his guns. The character also lifted his guns. Cherri was looking at the one-eyed character on the screen. The one-eyed character stared straight back. The argument continued, but unbeknownst to Cherri or Angel, ink was slowly leaking from everywhere in the flat. The pieces were finally falling into place inside Cherri's head. There should be a GIF or video here. Update the app now to see it end at 108. The Mickey Mouse character was now staring at the Cyclops in the real world. "Bendy, so I must ask, what is the matter, Cherri?" the character on screen asked. Cherri's face widened in realization and horror.
Bendy something augt your eye.
The TV exploded in a flurry of sparks and ink. The head of the intruder shot around to face the two friends with blinding speed. Instead of a face, there was a hideously large mouth leaking fountains of ink and blood, with grotesque misshapen teeth as sharp as razor blades aligning its cracked lips. The demonic amalgamation of teeth and tongues screamed with ear-splitting force, enough to make parts of the room crumble, as an unholy light within its gaping maw blinded Angel and Cherri, who were screaming in unbridled terror. They sprinted for the door only to find out it had been sealed with ink. The serrated tentacles of the monster then latched onto the limbs of the unfortunate souls as it dragged them ever closer to its mouth. They tried to kick and beat their way out of it, but none of it worked. They looked at each other one last time in sadness and fear before being devoured. Late in the evening, a black skeletal figure was walking through a colorfully lit club with a big bag in his hand. Any demons who weren't drunk either ran away or hid from the creature. Eventually, the creature reached a fancy door and opened it without knocking. revealing a decorative office as a man behind his desk looked up with annoyance. But his annoyance quickly vanished and turned into a smirk. "Valentino, you have him then. Bendy, did you ever doubt me?" Bendy unzipped the bag to reveal an unconscious Angel Dust, who looked like he had just gone through the worst nightmare of his life. "Bendy, he'll wake up in an hour or two." "Valentino, you told me he had a friend. Where is she?" Bendy thought for a moment for an appropriate answer. "Bendy, somewhere where I can keep an eye on her." Bendy laughed as he left Angel Dust at the mercy of the moth pimp. The ink demon laughed menacingly all the way into the night. The Grand Tour. 1 month after the events of All Caught Up, a luxurious limousine was speeding down the fiery streets of Pentagram City. Onlookers of all shapes and sizes gazed at the car and knew almost instantly who was in there despite the red-tinted windows. The vehicle itself was painted and decorated in such a glamorous fashion that seemed out of place on the blood-soaked roads of hell. This was a car that belonged to the devil himself. The king and queen of hell were sitting near the back of the car, with the king polishing his apple cane and the queen dabbing various types of makeup on her beautiful face. She was somewhat calm about this urgent meeting since she was never the one to partake in politics. The king, however, was looking out his window upon his cutthroat kingdom and sighed. "Lilith, what is the problem, dear?" "Lucifer, did I make the right choice, Lilith?" "Lilith, what do you mean?" Lucifer, trusting him of all people to carry out a process that dictates how hell doesn't crumble to an endless sea of sinners. Should I have given him that kind of power? "Lilith, you already know what I think of that black hag and how you didn't stop him from hurting our daughter." "Lucifer, neither did you," he said sternly. "Lilith, we don't know the true extent of his power. He could have even hurt me, but you're the king. You should have stood up to him." "Lucifer, until Charlotte learns the valuable lesson of not trying to fix something that isn't broken, then she will have my full support." "Lilith, and yet you are willing to go along with the ideas of a psychopath to solve a problem that doesn't exist. Hypocritical, don't you think?" "Lucifer, I'm not fond of him at all, dear. He is definitely a loathsome creature. But I'm tired of seeing someone else rule my kingdom that isn't me." "Lilith, you were once one of them, dear." Lucifer looked up in deep thought. Lilith, Charlie is in her rebellious stage. The angel within her is so full of life. I remember when you were like that the first time we met. "Lucifer, I'm not one of his lackeys anymore. I don't want her to go through the same pain." The two of them sat in sullen silence for a few moments until the driver opened the window in front of the couple. "Driver, we have arrived, Your Highness." The two looked at each other before taking a deep breath and exited the limousine. They were now standing in front of a mighty factory, with numerous pipes pumping heated ink jutting out of the factory in loops and twirls, making it look like a haunted roller coaster. The building was mainly constructed with a cold rustic metal, although the inside of the building seemed to favor a warmer wooden look as the couple snuck a glance through one of the bar windows. One of the very few there were. A few gigantic chimneys spewed out hot smoke and ash that could be felt from all the way at the bottom, while the horns boomed loudly through the city. Before they could begin to judge, an inky creature in a much smarter attire seemed to welcome the guests in a silent fashion before beckoning them to follow him through the corpse-littered courtyard. They eventually came across the daunting doors of the Callous Castle before a few more animalistic ink slaves slowly opened the doors, with much strain being heard in the groans of pain. In a swift motion, a surprisingly clean red carpet was rolled across the wooden floor far into the factory's inner halls as a sign of respect for the cleanliness of the king and queen. The two looked at each other with some uncertainty before finally stepping foot within the ink demon's enormous empire. There should be a GIF or video here. Update the app now to see it. Shows the inner workings of the factory, and the slaves sing it as a woeful theme. For the king and queen of hell. Seeing this sort of torture wasn't anything new. But the unnatural screams, groans and gurgles of these once normal sinners was unnerving even for them. It was as if the ink demon had pried into their minds and drowned any sense of normality and replaced it with insanity. The tears and blood of all those innocents they hurt had stained their souls, and the ink demon had brought them into the light, and threw the almost lifeless carcasses into labor at his infernal factory. Speak of the devil, Bendy, Your Majesty. Welcome to Bendy's Incorporation Studio. The cartoon loomed out into view from the shadows of the halls to greet the royal guests. Lucifer, I'm sure you know why we're here, Bendy. Bendy, of course. A progress report, and oh my, I didn't expect your lovely wife to come here and visit me. Lilith, don't think too much of it, Bendy. I'm just here to look after my husband," she said with a small grin as Lucifer just grumbled, "Bendy, no offense, but isn't he the devil? I'm sure he can look after himself." Lilith rolled her eyes. "Bendy, anyway, let's get going on the grand tour." The trio walked through the factory, and although the steamy, inky aroma of the cavernous rooms left much to be desired, the machinery itself was quite the work of art. Each bolt, gear, switch and light were meticulously combined together in one machine after another. And all technical equipment played a part in many ways, from fabrication, illumination, animation, and so forth. But as interesting as this was on paper, Bendy knew the king and queen wanted proof his home can solve the overpopulation in hell, so he decided to skip to the main course, the Heavenly Toys department. Bendy, a lot of the hard labor goes on in this department. Every piece of merchandise is crafted and stitched together exactly as I want them, without fault, as one of my colleagues would say. Anything less than perfect is left behind. Bendy motioned to an office at the top of the room with windows overlooking the entire operation. The king and queen could see the faint silhouette of a woman on the phone, practically screaming down the other line for unknown reasons. What caught their eye, however, was that one half of her face appeared to be as beautiful as an angel, while the other half was as loathsome as a demon. "Lucifer, I have a question, Bendy," Lucifer said, directing his attention back to the cartoon. "Lucifer, how exactly are you going to stop your factory from filling up with too many workers? Surely you would need to find some way to cut down the number of employees from time to time in order to avoid overpopulation here as well." Just as he finished his sentence, the trio noticed a slave on one of the conveyor belts mess up a toy and was desperately trying to fix it. Cries of fear were emanating from the creature as it shook with terror. The other slaves gave tiny looks of pity, as if a tiny piece of their once human souls was finally showing. But the pity stopped and they carried on with the work, while the lone worker could do nothing but plead for its life, or whatever life it still had. From beneath the balcony of the trio, still looking at the poor slave, a creature with a much more masculine build walked out of the darkness. Axe in hand, he wore a pair of heavy-duty overalls, hiking boots, and wore a Bendy cutout mask stained with ink over his face. He walked tantalizingly slowly towards the whimpering worker, who had their hands in a praying motion. The indescribable noises coming from its misshapen mouth seemed to be begging for forgiveness and mercy. "But down here there is no such thing. He will set us free," the dark man muttered before lifting his axe and with one quick swipe, decapitated the creature as its head fell to the floor with a thud, with the body falling to the ground not too long after. The slave's remains then fell apart and its inky interior trickled through the floorboards, becoming one with the liquid void. "Bendy, we take mistakes here very seriously. The only problem with the employees is that they slowly lose more of their sanity and intelligence as my ink corrupts them. So mishaps like the one we just witnessed happen all the time. However, this issue has its benefits. We constantly need new workers to fill in the gaps. So in the end, the whole too many demons problem is sorted." The masculine worker was then seen trotting up the stairs to the balcony where his master was. "Bendy, anything to report, Sammy?" "Sammy, apart from that wretch screwing up, no, nothing to mention. Are these our guests, my lord?" "Bendy, indeed they are. Lucifer, Lilith, meet Sammy." "Sammy, meet Lucifer and Lilith." The servant of Bendy bowed respectfully towards the king and queen. "Sammy, it is truly an honor. Lilith, you certainly have a lot more nice manners than the other souls I've seen in this factory. Sammy, it pays to at least be a gentleman for a beautiful woman such as yourself." Lilith grew an ever so slight blush on her cheeks, one that didn't go unnoticed by Lucifer, who practically had steam exhaling through his ears. Bendy noticed this, and as much as he would enjoy it, he decided to quickly change the subject just so his whole home wouldn't burst into hellish flames. "Bendy, shall we continue? There is so much more of the factory left to see." The king calmed down and took hold of Lilith's hand as they walked back to the endless corridors. "Bendy, Sammy, make sure to keep it under wraps," he whispers. "Sammy, right away, my lord." Sammy walks back down to the working area. "Sammy, if any one of you mess up, I'll string your intestines." This was enough to scare all the workers to continuing their job at a faster pace. Later, the tour had concluded and Bendy was now escorting the king and queen back to their limousine. "Lucifer, I must say at first I didn't think you could pull it off, Bendy. But looking at it now, it is certainly remarkable." "Bendy, thank you dearly for the compliment and visit your majesty." Just remember the doors will always be open for you and your family. Except Charlotte, he muttered under his breath. Eventually the couple left the scene at speed since they had many other duties to attend. But this tour had definitely sealed the deal between the ink demon and the devil. Bendy's incorporation studio could now grow uncontested. Until the faithful day arrived, when Bendy reigned supreme. Hell of a situation. 5 days later, after the events of the Grand Tour, not too long after the events of the Harvest Festival episode, silence. Until a dirty van raced through the streets at sublime speed. Horrible music was booming through the open windows from a practically broken speaker as within the van the driver was beating his head up and down constantly as if all his sanity had been thrown out the window along with the music. Sir, don't you ever think that your singing isn't exactly up to notch? I can't hear myself think, what's that, Moxie? I can't hear you over my impeccable singing. You know, for once the dickbag has a point. Blitz, your singing sucks ass. Oh, Looney, stop, the admiration is killing me. They both sighed in frustration. Moxie, I swear it's like talking to a brick wall. Millie, it's not that big a deal, honey. Besides, if you want I could help you relax when we're back home. She purred afterwards, definitely catching Moxie's undying attention for her. Luna watched the fuck out. Before the imp couple could comprehend what was said, the van they were in was struck violently, tossing and turning many times as the outside layer of the van crumpled, and on the inside, the passengers and items within flew about uncontrollably. The cycle of crashing and spinning eventually stopped as the van crashed into what sounded like a metal fence. The couple slowly opened their eyes and groaned in pain. Once they saw each other, they crawled over to help the other out. They saw a few minor injuries, but nothing they couldn't recover from. As soon as they made sure they were okay, Millie knocked down the passenger door to what was the left of the van if it hadn't been flipped upside down. As they crawled out, they noticed the other two had also escaped relatively unharmed. Now was the chance to just sit back and take in their surroundings to come up with a rational solution to their current predicament. That was until Blitz shouted, "Blitz, my radio. All my favorite CDs were in there," he sobbed. "Luna, never mind that. What was up with your stunt back there? Are you retarded?" Blitz, considering that crash, I may very well be. But let's not dwell on the past. Millie, what exactly happened? Luna, Blitz saw a stand selling horse-shaped balloons and tried to do a drive-through sale at speed. Moxie, yep, that sounds like something he would do. Blitz, hey, in my defense, it would have worked if that truck wasn't there immediately after. Moxie, what are we going to do now? We're in Pentagram City and we're imps. People aren't going to take too kindly to us. Blitz, relax your ass, Mox. I'll think of a way to get back to Imp City in no time. Blitz, okay, I have no idea. Luna, why am I not surprised? She responded sarcastically. Millie, guys, what exactly is this place? Everyone else drew their attention to Millie to find out what she was talking about, and their mouths slowly dropped to the floor. A factory as large as life, with a dominating shadow looming over the tiny imps, protruded from the blackened ground and puffed out a volatile concoction of ink, smoke, and God knows what else. Sounds of metal grinding, wood creaking, and ink churning emanated loudly from the building as the little group stared at the palace of endless night with confusion and shock. Blitz, definitely not as bad as Stola's sex dungeon. Moxie, I feel like this place reminds me of something, but I can't put my finger on it, he pondered. Luna, ugh, this place reeks of rotten stuff. Let's just get the fuck out of here. Millie, well, unless you can lift a van stuck in barbed wire and tar, then be my guest. She joked. All four were looking at their van, which was in a very sticky situation. They couldn't drive out, and they certainly couldn't walk back since they'll probably be robbed, raped, murdered, or all three. Moxie, why do you always get us into trouble, Blitz? Blitz, oh, that's right, blame me. At least I have the balls to perform a daring stunt compared to your little blueberries. Moxie, the size of our genitalia is not the point, sir. As they argued, Luna huffed in annoyance and took out her phone as Millie tried to break up the fight. As the commotion was going on, Luna noticed something while looking at her phone. Well, just to the side of the phone, some worms seemed to be emerging from the black dirt. She recoiled in disgust and stepped away, only for the worms to follow her movement. The more she looked at them, the more odd they appeared to be. They were somewhat thick, dark in coloration, and even moved in unison at times. Luna thought for a moment before realizing they weren't worms. Although she was a little too late to voice her concerns, a hand immediately shot up from the ground and grasped at her leg, causing her to trip and scream. This drew everyone's attention and they immediately stopped their argument and ran to her side to help her up and pry open the ghoulish hand. It worked and she was free. Luna, holy shit. Blitz, Looney, are you okay? Luna, yeah, I'm fine. She said, panting with fatigue. The group assumed they were out of danger. However, they couldn't be more wrong. As yet more hands burst out of the ground, desperately attempting to latch on to the demons and bury them alive. The creatures soon started to claw their way out of the dirt like vicious zombies and hoist themselves out onto the surface where their full grim appearance could be seen. They were like ghosts who had been drenched in ink and then had their souls violently ripped out of them. They spat and drooled ink from their minuscule mouths and had a shrunken figure which looked like it could be easily snapped in two. They walked and crawled to the imps and the hellhound who were terrified to the bone. Blitz, light em up. He shouted as he pulled out dual pistols and shot frantically at the creatures. They screeched in pain but still kept moving. Moxie, all of our weapons are still in the van. The van at this point had been covered with more of the unnatural monsters as the group itself was becoming quickly overwhelmed. Blitz ran out of bullets and backed his family up. Worry was quickly growing in the group as they had nowhere else to go and the inky creatures closed in on them. Luna growled. Millie stood in front of Moxie protectively. And Blitz was yelling profanities, closer, closer. Closer, closer, Bem. An unknown force behind the group knocked them all out stone cold. Bring them to him. Blitz slowly woke up and noticed the others waking up too in a groggy way. Luna groaned in pain as she still felt the impact on the back of her head, but she was soon shushed by the creatures who were dragging their weak bodies through darkly lit hallways. Millie tried to escape but her hands were chained behind her back with a mysterious metal. The arduous journey carried on until a room came into view. There should be a GIF or video here. Update the app now to see it. Goblin King is Bendy. Goblins are ink slaves. Dwarves are IMP. Stop at 205. You can change the lyrics if you want. After the song concluded, the inky overlord took his place back on the throne and decided to engage in actual conversation. Bendy, catchy, isn't it? It's one of my own compositions. Millie, it's not a song. It's a fucking abomination like you. Instead of being angered like she hoped for. Bendy and every creature in the throne room laughed. Bendy, abominations, mutations, aberrations. That's all you're going to find down here, sweetheart. He chuckled. Moxie, I thought I recognized this place. It's the Incorporation Studio and you're Bendy. The ink demon Bendy, ah. So I see I'm recognized in Imp City as well. Blitz, how the fuck do you know? Bendy, the license plate on your vehicle. Speaking of which, who exactly would be so stupid as to crash an ugly van into my kingdom? Spies, thieves, prostitutes, Sammy, assassins, my lord. Bendy, assassins. Sammy, their van is full of weapons. And they're engraved with an imp emblem. I believe they're an assassination company. Blitz, yeah, no shit, Sherlock, we're the immediate murder professionals. He stated proudly, whereas everyone just gave him a tired look. Bendy, if they're assassins, don't just stand there. Search them. He ordered his slaves, who quickly took to patting the group down for any weapons or tools. Bendy, they're bound to have guns and knives in every nook and cranny. He mused. The rough search carried on until a particular item fell out of Blitz's pocket. A lighter, except it was very posh in design. It certainly wasn't a regular item for a lowly imp to hold. Sammy picked it up and presented it to his dark master. Sammy, it is my belief, my lord, that they are in league with the Ghoulishes. He said through gritted teeth as every other creature hissed in hatred. Bendy inspected the item closely. Bendy, a genuine silver and gold-laced, feather-carved lighter. Scoff, a classic trademark of those pretentious pigeons. He crushed the lighter with one hand before throwing it away. Blitz grimaced since it was a gift to him by a certain someone. But then he thought, why did he care? He could just get another one. What was between him and the guy was purely transactional. Right. He snapped out of his thoughts when the ink demon spoke up again. This time with a more angered tone. Bendy, what are you even doing in Pentagram City? Blitz, okay, do you want the short story or the long story? Bendy, short and sweet. Blitz, well, the short story is still pretty long, so I'm going to need a good smoke to get the vocal cords going. If only there was a lighter around here that wasn't crushed by a Mickey Mouse ass-kisser. He fake pouted in extreme sarcasm. Bendy, be rest assured, imp. I will crush a lot more than your lighter. His demonic voice boomed through the entire factory. The sounds of wailing and screaming from the slaves begged for the thunderous noise to end. Even people from outside the factory and far across the Pride Ring could hear his rage practically exploding, and quickly ran away. Bendy suddenly grew in size and sprouted many spikes from his body. His sounds became more monstrous as his entire frame morphed into a hideous beast with inky skin as black as night. His many crooked teeth were bared. Growling and roaring in fury at the puny pests in his palace, the group backed up as much as they can, struggling to get past the slaves behind them who kept pushing them forward to the deathly maw of the ink demon. After many curses, one of them tried to stop the madness. "Moxie, if you want answers, I can give them to you." Everyone stopped and silence fell upon the room once more. The giant creature looked towards the imp and tilted its head in curiosity. "Moxie, I'm so sorry for my boss's brash behavior, Bendy. And I can give you the answers you desire so long as you let us all live. Please." The demon thought for a moment as the slaves eagerly awaited their next orders. The beast eventually began morphing back into his more recognizable shape and cooled his temper. He sat back down on his throne and with a wave of his hand, the slaves calmed down and let the imps plus hellhounds stand more comfortably. "Bendy, I repeat, what are you doing in Pentagram City, Moxie?" "Well, we were on the road heading towards Pentagram City because our boss had a client who was willing to pay." Bendy was listening intently for the first few seconds before he got quickly annoyed by the imp's voice. This Invader Zim character sounded worse than Mickey with phlegm. Bendy rubbed his giant inky head in frustration and muttered to himself as he immediately regretted letting him talk. "Bendy, shut up," he whispered to himself, and yet Moxie carried on. "Moxie, a tough customer, and so we had to come here and things were going well until—" "Bendy, shut up. Moxie, Blitz is just weird that way. You should see how many times I caught him doing—" "Bendy, shut the fuck up." His inner demon exploded to the surface once again as the ink all around the factory bubbled and rippled with anticipation for the potential tsunami of death. The creatures of the factory braced themselves for their master's outburst. Moxie finally zipped his mouth shut in fear of what might come next. Silence was all that was heard in the room from both sides until Bendy spoke up again. "Bendy, are any of you going to give me answers?" With comprehensible voices, the team looked at each other with stumped faces. They were all annoying in their own ways. They looked back in defiance of the ink demon's request. "Bendy, very well then. I'll just have to settle with your dying screams. Bendy, start with this one." He gestured towards Moxie, who simply gulped while his wife stood in front of him protectively. Right on cue, the ink creatures started bringing in torture equipment, all while giggling and gurgling in enjoyment. After the chaos of today, however, one person in particular finally had enough. "Luna, alright, listen here, you son of a bitch." Everyone looked at her stunned. "Luna, as much as I would like to see Moxie get his ass beat, I am in no mood for that shit, so why don't we find a way to cut our losses and make a deal?" Blitz whisper, "Looney, what are you doing?" Luna whisper, "Relax, I know how this works. When you're a receptionist in hell, you have to do this sort of stuff daily." Blitz whisper, "Well, don't let me stop you." Luna rolled her eyes and turned her attention back towards Bendy. "Luna, what do you say?" "Bendy, you are a feisty one, I'll give you that." Just then a light bulb turned on in Bendy's brain. He smirked with evil intent. "Bendy, all right. I will let you all go scot-free if you give me something first." Luna looked back at the crew, who were still chained and at risk of being tortured to death. Were they really in a position to argue? "Luna, name it," she said reluctantly. "Bendy, I want your blood." Luna, Blitz, Millie, Moxie, what? "The FSKW, Bendy, you heard me. I want a sample of your blood for research purposes. If you do that, then I will let you all leave. Do we have a deal?" Blitz whisper, "No fucking way am I letting my daughter have her blood being slurped out by that dirty shitbag." Luna, "I forbid." Luna, Blitz, "If I don't go along with this, then we are all done for. Is that what you want?" Moxie, "I'm afraid she's right, sir." Blitz responded to this with a hard glare. "Millie, Blitz, it's either she loses some blood or we lose all our blood. There's no other way." Millie pleaded with Blitz to let this be. After what seemed like an eternity of hard inner thinking, Blitz finally nodded with extreme reluctance. He then did a watching you sign to Bendy. The ink demon only grinned at this meager threat. "Luna, deal." Bendy clapped his hands. "Bendy, wonderful, now you may feel a slight pinch." Luna, "What do you do?" She looked to her right arm to see a rather sizable needle in her arm, inserted by the creatures, which was hooked to a blood bag. Bendy, I did warn you slowly. The hellhound blood snaked its way through the foretube all the way to the bag. For Bendy and the slaves, it was satisfying to see the life force of a soul drain away. As the bag was half full, Luna started to feel more and more dizzy as the rest of her body weakened. Blitz was quick to notice this. Blitz, you have enough fucking blood, take it out. Bendy, just a little bit more. The bag was now 3/4 full, and Luna was dangerously close to collapsing as her senses grew null and tired. Blitz, take it out, you asshole. He shouted as his worry grew exponentially. Bendy, nearly there. Blitz attempted to run to his daughter to help her but was stopped by a sharp axe very close to his throat. Sammy was standing there with a smug smile as he did a waving finger motion with his spare hand. Luna never looked more pale and shriveled. Any more blood loss and the possibility of dying seemed all the more likely. Bendy, and we're done. The slaves took the needle out of her arm before placing a bandage on it. Luna fell and Blitz quickly caught her and checked her pulse to see that she was still alive. But barely. She was quietly whimpering as her adoptive father was close on the verge of tears. So much so that he couldn't even think of anything to say. The imp couple were equally shocked. Millie, you call that a fucking sample? She pointed towards the almost full bag of blood angrily. Bendy, relax, she's alive. She'll just be a bit woozy for a while. But judging by the stench of alcohol on her, I suppose that's nothing new, is it? Luna, fuck will you, she muttered weakly. Bendy, anyway, a deal is a deal. He said as he snapped his fingers and the chains on the assassination crew magically released. Bendy, my workers will escort you to the exit. Off you pop. He said cheerily as the rest of the crew helped Blitz to lift Luna and walked out of the throne room in sullen silence. Blitz looked behind him one last time and stared searing daggers at the ink demon and mouthed the words, I will kill you. Bendy understood this and, like always, he smiled maliciously. Bendy mouthed the words, nice to meet you two, before the mighty doors closed in the throne room, blocking vision from both sides. Bendy then walked up to the bag of hellhound blood that the slaves handed to him. The bag was nearly filled to the brim with 4 gallons of the red liquid. Bendy lifted it up with one strong gloved hand and stared deep into the crimson contents. Bendy, welcome to the winning team, Boris. Outside the studio of death, the IMP crew walked back to their van, which was thankfully in one piece. They sat Luna down in the back while Blitz took the wheel and drove back to Imp City, deciding that the client wasn't worth it. The client in particular looked down at the van through binoculars on a nearby rooftop, only to see it driving away as growled in anger at his plan failing. The client then looked at the incorporation studio and grinned with a new plan in mind. IMP can wait, the ink demon on the other hand cannot. He loaded a carmine-crafted blessing-tipped shotgun. Assassin's greed. Just after the events of hell of a situation, the figure quickly descended down the side of the building and landed lightly on the floor. He grinned as he readied himself and his weapon until he suddenly got a phone call. He knew instantly who it was and rolled his eyes as he answered the phone. Stella, status report, Stryker. Stryker, my previous plan to get rid of the imps failed. Which means it'll make killing your husband all the more difficult. However, I am in a perfect position to kill that other guy you so desperately want dead. Stella, the ink demon. Stryker, that's right. So I will be expecting that bonus. He answered smugly. Stella, whatever. Just get rid of that fucking cartoon. She stopped the call as Stryker leapt into action. He ran to the factory on the opposite side of the road unseen and snuck through the destroyed fence that the ink slaves were currently trying their best to repair. One lifted its head momentarily after assuming he heard a whoosh sound but thought nothing of it and got back to the job at hand. Stryker was now at the doors of the factory. From other viewpoints, this place was an impenetrable fortress, but not from Stryker's viewpoint. He decided to scale the walls of the factory with a spare grappling hook he had on his person. As he climbed the outside walls, he felt the heat of the machines and fire within the factory. He made his way to one of the very few open windows that was covered in condensation and peeked inside. Down below, the creatures were hammering, sawing and drilling away at numerous machines and spare parts. The creatures were groaning in pain as their fatigue grew with each tired, agonizing swing, although they were quickly shut up. If you don't shut those mouths this instant, I'll make your insides your outsides. Stryker almost lost his grip on the windowsill when he heard that horrible screeching. He noted how it seemed to have come from a vaguely feminine creature supervising from her balcony. The way she acted was nearly as bitchy as Stella. Stryker snapped out of his thoughts and got back to the task at hand. He slid down the pipes on the inner walls of the factory and silently landed in yet another manufacturing sector. Once there, he quietly snuck past the slaves in order not to alert them of his presence. He was now deep in the decrepit dungeon, taking many twists and turns through the winding halls. This unholy place was a literal maze, and Stryker couldn't help but feel he was being watched by a ghastly presence. Yet no matter how many times he turned around to survey his surroundings, he never saw a thing. He brushed it off as just the heat getting to him and kept sneaking down the never-ending corridors. Eventually, a room with a large door was spotted by Stryker. The door was slightly ajar. Stryker, letting his curiosity get the better of him, walked through the door and saw that the room was dimly lit with just a few candles. The candles surrounded a classic demonic pentagram carved into the floor and then painted on with ink. Stryker could tell some messed up things were happening here and decided it was best to leave. Suddenly, all the candles blew out as an unfamiliar cold breeze washed through the room, leaving it in darkness. Stryker got his gun out, ready for the worst. Then, an array of lights flashed on the walls and ceiling, revealing a gaping pit at the far end of the room with some chains piercing out of the hole. A mechanism of sorts could be heard as Stryker only tensed up more. The multitude of heavy-duty chains were pulling a great weight from the darkness beneath, and after a few arduous seconds, a machine was revealed. It blew a few more shots of steam until the mechanism quietened down and Stryker was fully able to take the majesty of this machine. It was nearly as large as the room itself, and it was probably the cleanest thing he had seen in this godforsaken temple of the Ink Demon. But despite its majesty, Stryker felt something wasn't quite right about it. It was as if a void was hidden inside the machine, ferociously tearing at the inner walls to escape its eternal prison. This void spoke of nothing but death, darkness, blood, screaming, and the eventual end of all things. Stryker, who was frozen in place, knocked himself out of his strange trance and walked backwards slowly, weary of the machine and wanting to get his job done so he could get the hell out of this factory. Too bad someone was standing right behind him. Sammy, glorious, isn't it? Stryker shot right around and aimed his shotgun at the location of the voice, revealing itself to be Sammy Lawrence, Bendy's right-hand man. Stryker, get the fuck out of my way if you want your head to remain in one piece. Sammy seemingly paid no mind to this threat as he kept talking. Sammy, a creation where the boundary between the magical and the technological has been all but erased. Stryker, are you begging to get shot? He said as he clicked his gun, eagerly waiting to use it. Sammy, you know, in this place wandering is considered a sin, especially for intruders. So how much did you actually see? Stryker, I don't care about what I saw. I'm here to kill your boss. Where is he? Sammy chuckled darkly. Sammy, everywhere. But if you want to kill my lord, you're going to have to go through me. Sammy then whipped out an axe, embroidered with angelic symbols that shone brightly despite the black ink that covered it. Stryker knew he would have a fight on his hands, so he wasted no time in pulling the trigger. Before the shots hit, however, Sammy used the axe head to block the incoming projectile, and quickly threw the axe forward to knock the gun out of Stryker's hands. Sammy tackled Stryker to the ground and got 2 punches on him before Stryker leaned up and head-butted him despite Sammy wearing a mask. But it was enough to daze both of them, so Stryker sluggishly threw Sammy off of him and crawled to reach his gun. Just before he could reach it, however, Sammy jumped over him and kicked it further away, then proceeding to swiftly swing the axe down on Stryker, who rolled away from the blows repeatedly. Stryker got back up on his feet and this time caught the axe in his hands. Sammy tried pushing the blade down with all his might, but Stryker planned this as he sidestepped and let the momentum of the axe swing forward slightly, missing Stryker and allowing him to elbow Sammy in the face in a counterattack before disarming him. All of this caused Sammy to fall on his back and growl in anger. Now it was Stryker's turn as he got ready to swing the angelic axe down on his opponent's chest. But before he could, Sammy did the unexpected and literally tore off a part of his inky torso and threw it into Stryker's eyes, temporarily blinding him. This allowed Sammy to kick Stryker in the crotch, get back up, and pin him against the wall with the axe handle as he grunted in pain. The two struggled against each other for what seemed like an eternity as neither side was gaining the advantage until Stryker used his tail to strangle Sammy from behind. Sammy was eventually weakened and Stryker turned the tables by forcing Sammy himself against the wall. With one swift motion he kneed Sammy in the gut, grabbed him by the scruff of the neck and threw into a nearby barrel which cracked on impact. Stryker thought he won as Sammy looked unconscious and dropped the axe while walking to retrieve his gun. Suddenly, without warning, the angelic axe swung down from above on Stryker's hand as he reached for the gun, denting the shotgun with the force of the impact and severing all 4 of Stryker's fingers. He screamed in sheer pain as he held his hand with blood seeping from the wound. He looked up to see Sammy with a clear grin on his face as he swung the axe from the side, aiming for his head. Stryker was quick to react as he ducked and rolled past Sammy to grab his gun. "Stryker, what comes around goes around, bitch," he shouted as he shot at Sammy's arm and completely dismembered it from the rest of his body, earning a scream in pain from Sammy as well, though not as loud as Stryker's earlier. After all, he was just made of ink. Before they could continue their tussle, however, a distinct rumbling could be felt all around them. Then telltale ink started leaking from the walls and ceiling, causing Sammy to fall to his knees and bow. "Sammy, he is here," he exclaimed with pride. Stryker could only look on with confusion as he heard the wooden planks beneath him groan and stretch. This process continued until a fountain of ink burst through the floor behind Stryker, causing him to fall on his front, knocking the wind out of him. He turned around to see a torrent of black liquid spewing high into the air like an eruption. This dark column of ink then did the unnatural as it leaned down and looked at the helpless Stryker, eyeing him up as its next meal. Sammy only laughed maniacally at Stryker's misfortune as the assassin in question was too stunned to move. The ink fountain then formed into a monstrously large tentacle that grabbed Stryker's whole body with teeth poking and stabbing him. His screams of torture were heard all throughout the factory, but no one could care less. The tentacle swung Stryker around the room, grazing the skin on his face multiple times before coming to a stop at the center of the room. Stryker weakly peered down to see a whirlpool of ink and many more tentacles furiously writhing in the wretched pool. The tentacle holding Stryker then loosened its grip on the fearful assassin as he desperately clung on. But the moist surface proved to be too slippery as Stryker lost his grip and fell down. As if in slow motion, Stryker saw the face of the one he meant to kill in the deathly pool. A jolly yet vicious face that demonically roared as Stryker fell into Bendy's fanged maw. Blood sprayed the whole room as bones were crunched, organs were shredded, and never-ending screams of unimaginable pain echoed through the vast halls of the Ink Demon's palace. There should be a GIF or video here. Update the app now to see it. Drinks and dread. The crimson sky was glistening as a posh car is driven along the frightful roads of hell's most vile cities. The journey, fraught with peril, was eventually finished when the same car pulled up by an extravagant gate and waited for permission to enter. After some sly words were spoken, permission was given and the magnificent bars of royalty opened slowly, allowing the car to drive through at a slow pace. Once the driver found a suitable place to park amongst the many other attending visitors' vehicles, he walked out and opened the car doors behind him to reveal a very smartly dressed, fishy family. But this wasn't just any family. This family ruled over the Envy Ring and had close ties with Lucifer himself. The fact that the eldest son was at one point set to marry the princess spoke of their power. This was the Von Eldritch family. Their gaze simultaneously shifted to the mansion in front of them. It was a beauty of architecture and royalty, which is a rare sight amongst the otherwise deprived and barren landscape that is hell. With mighty pillars outlining the outside to further symbolize the majesty and power the mansion has within its thick walls. Mother, stay with the car, Smith driver. Yes, ma'am. The family walked through the larger-than-life doors of the mansion and were greeted with an unforgettable sight. Polished floors, a bountiful buffet, sickeningly sweet decorations, magical music, and a golden chandelier encrusted with jewels that shone with all the colors of a rainbow, hanging proudly from the colorful ceiling. Another uncommon spectacle in hell, since the dominant red sky looms over all in the infernal pit. The Von Eldritch family wasted no time in dining on the luxurious feast that laid before them before heading over to meet a few acquaintances. The Ghoulishes chatted amongst themselves in a neatly formed circle before one of them looked over the shoulders of another and loudly spoke up to announce the arrival of a few well-known friends. Stola's Mr. Von Eldritch. How delightful you could make it here. Father, of course. This is such a special time after all. It would be a crime not to attend. Mother, speaking of which, where is the young lady? It is necessary we properly congratulate her on her birthday. Stella, she's just having some problems with the dresses. You know what they're like at that age. Stella joked as she walked up begrudgingly next to her husband. Seeping, I know that pain. I don't believe we've met before. I'm Seeping, the eldest son. Stola's, so you were the first one to win the princess's affection. Seeping, yes. And I would have still had it if that annoying feminist sinner didn't get in the way. He answered, clearly annoyed with the subject, so everyone decided to talk about something else. Stella, so how is your business? I heard the folk over in the envy ring have become unruly. Mother, we're trying our best to settle the population. Seems some just can't accept change. Father, honestly I feel bad for you too. Stolas and Stella glanced at each other in confusion. Stolas, what do you mean, Father? Well, not only have you recently lost a lot of your influence here in the Pride Ring, due to one of your members having a hideous affair with an imp of all creatures. Stella's eyes shifted over to Stola's with suppressed rage while Stola stood still, acting as if that wasn't him. Father, but you've also had trouble from that overlord. What was his name again? Stella. Bendy. Has been a nuisance. But I recently sent an expert to work things out, so he won't be a problem anymore. She said with a small smirk. Mother, lovely to hear. Anyway, have you tried the roasted zebra? It is simply exquisite. As the party continued inside the mansion, outside the royal grounds, a vehicle silently glided through a thick fog and came to a halt at the closed gate. The vehicle was an old model, one that would suit a Laster well. It was entirely black from front to back with tinted windows that concealed the happenings inside. A steady yet unnerving thrum emanated from the beating engine. The man on the speaker spoke through. Speaker person, we aren't expecting any more visitors, so please. Before he could finish, the window facing the speaker opened slightly and an object was angrily thrown at the speaker. That object turned out to be an ink-stained gloved hand that was very reminiscent of a certain someone. That hand then suddenly melted through the speaker like butter. What occurred next could only be assumed as slaughter, as cries of pain screamed through the speaker before cutting to an eerie static. The gate in front then magically opened and the vehicle flashed a pair of blinding lights in front of it, illuminating the road to the mansion. The engine then seemed to growl furiously as the vehicle crept up to the party, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Meanwhile, the guests continued to ravish the food and sway to the melancholy music. It was clear most were enjoying themselves in this fine night, but there was a pair that were distracted from the festivities. Stella, where is she? I swear all of our friends will be gone if she doesn't come soon. Male Ghoulish, one, I'm sure there's nothing to worry about, Stella. Besides, there's still plenty of cake, he said joyously. Stella rolled her eyes. She found Stolas chatting amongst a few other guests and walked up to him and pulled him away so they can talk somewhere more private. Stella, have you seen Octavia? She's late. Stolas, I'm afraid not. I was going to ask you if you knew Stella, but... Before she could say a single sentence, the main doors giving passage to the party started to open by themselves, as if they were being pushed by an unseen force. The fancy wood that embezzled the doors and joints creaked and groaned, with their awful sounds reverberating all the way through the vast hall, catching everyone's attention. The guests murmured as to what's causing the awful racket as the doors finally reached their destinations adjacent to each other. Ceasing the racket then, an unnatural cold swept over the audience, causing slight discomfort and shivering for those who had never experienced the cold before. The surrounding lights dimmed until they were nothing but specks of weak flames that barely showed. The once glamorous buffet slowly rotted before the onlookers' eyes, already adding to the unmistakable sense of death and decay that had invaded the mansion. The mood of happiness and celebration shared amongst the crowd was replaced with fright and trepidation, especially for the Goulishes, who deep down felt that something about this was all too familiar. The once prideful orchestra had also gradually died down and the performers themselves seemed to fall in a deep sleep. However, the audience didn't notice, since all their eyes were directed at the entrance. If they did, they would have seen small black tears falling from their eyelids. Silence.